The sound of rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of the Seoul penthouse. Inside, the air was thick with silence, the kind of silence that carried power. Juntae sat behind a massive black desk, his eyes cold and unreadable. His suit was perfectly tailored. His wristwatch gleamed, and his fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk. In front of him lay a single white file, the surrogacy contract. He wasn't the kind of man to believe in fate or feelings. To him, life was business. Every deal had a price. Every person had a purpose. He had power, wealth, and an empire, but no heir. He didn't want love. He didn't trust women. He wanted bloodline. Nothing more. A soft knock came on the door. "Come in," his deep voice commanded. The door opened, and a woman walked in. Confident, tall, glowing in her dark brown skin and natural curls. Her name was Queen. For a second, the air shifted. Her beauty wasn't loud. It was calm and strong. The kind that made people look twice without knowing why. She stood before him, clutching her purse tightly but refusing to look nervous. "Mr. Juntae," she greeted, her voice low but steady. He lifted his eyes lazily from the file. "Miss Queen Johnson, right?" "Yes." He leaned back, eyes scanning her slowly, like he was assessing a rare piece of art. "You're not what I expected." Queen frowned. "And what exactly did you expect?" "A woman desperate for money. Someone who'd agree to carry a stranger's baby with her head down and lips shut." Queen smirked, folding her arms. "Well, sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not desperate. I'm doing this for my sister's surgery, not for your approval." A flicker of surprise flashed across his face. Most people never spoke to him like that. He almost smiled, almost. "You talk too much," he muttered, signing a document without looking up. "And you listen too little," she fired back. The tension between them thickened. She should have been intimidated by his sharp tone, by the way his cold eyes studied her like a challenge. But she wasn't. She stood taller. Juntae slid the contract toward her. "Read it carefully. Once you sign, there's no turning back." Queen glanced down. Every line screamed control, rules, conditions, boundaries. She wasn't allowed to travel without permission. Not allowed to see certain people. Every doctor's appointment would be handled by his people. She looked up, unimpressed. "You do realize I'm not one of your Mafia soldiers, right? I'm carrying a baby, not smuggling gold." He gave a dry laugh. "You're carrying my heir. That's worth more than gold." Her heart skipped, not from his words but from the way he said my. It was possessive, heavy, cold. She took the pen. "Let's get this over with." He watched silently as she signed. Her handwriting was strong and beautiful. Something about her calm defiance pulled at him, though he'd never admit it. When she finished, she pushed the papers back to him. "There. You own me now, at least for 9 months. Juntae's lips twitched slightly, the closest thing to a smile he'd shown in months. "Don't flatter yourself, Miss Queen. It's strictly business." Queen raised an eyebrow. "Good, because I'd rather chew glass than fall for a man who thinks emotions are a weakness." That made him stop. For the first time, his eyes softened, just a little. "Careful," he said quietly. "In my world, words can be dangerous. And in mine," she replied, picking up her purse. "Truth is louder than fear." She turned and walked out of the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Juntae watched her until she disappeared. He wasn't sure what it was. Her confidence, her honesty, or that fire in her eyes. But something about her had already started to bother him. He exhaled slowly, then reached for a cigarette. He never smoked unless something got under his skin. His right-hand man, Miho, walked in moments later. "Boss, is she the one?" Juntae nodded, still staring at the door. "Yes, she signed the contract." Miho tilted his head. "You don't seem happy." Juntae dropped the cigarette into the ashtray, his jaw tightening. "I don't get happy. I get results." But as he leaned back in his chair, he couldn't shake off the image of her bold eyes and that calm voice saying, "You own me now, at least for 9 months." It echoed in his mind, strange, sharp, and addictive. He tried to push it away. He was a Mafia boss. She was just a contract. And yet, something inside him whispered that this deal would change everything. Later that night, Queen sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the copy of the contract. Her hands trembled slightly. The money would save her sister. That was all that mattered. Still, she couldn't ignore the way his eyes had felt, like fire wrapped in ice. Dangerous, unreadable, but somehow magnetic. She laughed quietly to herself. "What have I just done?" she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled through the night. Somewhere across the city, Juntae poured himself a glass of whiskey, his mind still stuck on the name written at the bottom of that contract. Queen Johnson. And for the first time in years, the man who thought he could control everything couldn't stop thinking about someone he shouldn't. The next morning came wrapped in pale sunlight and nerves. The city was still waking up, but inside Hanul Private Hospital, everything was already in motion. The entire VIP floor had been booked out. No reporters, no strangers, no chance of leaks. When the richest and most dangerous man in Seoul decided to have a child through surrogacy, secrecy was survival. Queen arrived dressed simply, black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. She looked around the white hallway, feeling like she didn't belong there. Everything smelled expensive. The nurses' smiles were rehearsed. The walls gleamed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Room 807. "Don't keep me waiting." She rolled her eyes. "Of course," she muttered. "The boss gives orders even through texts." When she entered the room, Juntae was already there, standing by the window, his back to her, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a cup of black coffee. His reflection in the glass was calm, but his aura filled the whole room like electricity. He didn't turn around. "You're late." Queen glanced at the clock. "It's 8:02. The world didn't end." He turned then, his sharp eyes meeting hers. He looked as if he hadn't slept. Hair perfectly styled, black suit immaculate, but his face was tighter than usual. "You were supposed to be here at 8, he said simply. She folded her arms. "Maybe next time you can carry the baby yourself, Mr. Schedule." For a moment, his lips twitched, like he wanted to smile but stopped himself. "You talk too much for someone about to carry my heir. And you boss too much for someone who needs my womb," she shot back. The nurse standing nearby nearly choked on air. Juntae tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You really don't know who you're talking to, do you?" Queen shrugged. "You're a man with money and a cold heart. Nothing new." That line landed like a slap in the air. His jaw clenched. "You should be careful with your words. And you should be careful with your tone," she countered, stepping closer. "We're both here for one reason, business. Don't make it more miserable than it already is." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The nurse looked like she wanted to vanish. Then, to everyone's shock, Juntae let out a short laugh, low, rough, and real. "You're brave," he said softly. "Most people tremble when I raise my voice." "I'm not most people," she said, holding his gaze. Their eyes locked. Something flickered, tension, fire, something neither of them wanted to name. The nurse cleared her throat gently. "Mr. June, Miss Queen. We should start the procedure soon." Queen exhaled, breaking the stare. "Let's get this over with." He nodded curtly. "You'll be fine. My doctors are the best." "I'm not worried about the doctors," she muttered. "I'm worried about your ego." He almost smiled again. Almost. Minutes later, she lay on the hospital bed, heart racing. Machines beeped softly. Nurses whispered. The doctor explained every step in calm tones, but Queen barely heard him. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about her sister back home, fragile, waiting for her operation. She whispered a prayer. "God, let this go well, please." Through the small window in the door, she saw Juntae standing outside, arms crossed, eyes hard. But when the doctor inserted the needle, his jaw tightened, a small human crack in his mask. He pretended not to care, but his body was tense. Every tiny movement in that room reflected in his face. After what felt like forever, the doctor finally smiled. "It's done." Queen blinked, feeling weak but relieved. "So, it worked." "It will with time," the doctor said. "You can rest now." When she was wheeled into the recovery room, Juntae was waiting, as if he hadn't moved from that spot. He stood there silently, watching her breathe. "You didn't have to wait," she said, eyes half closed. I didn't, he replied. I wanted to make sure the procedure went as planned. Why? Afraid your investment might fail. He frowned slightly. You think too little of me. I think just enough, she said softly. He didn't reply, but when the nurse brought a cup of warm water, it wasn't the nurse who helped her sit up. It was him. His hand brushed hers, firm and steady. Drink, he ordered gently. She looked at him, surprised at his tone. Did you just say that politely? Don't get used to it, he said, looking away. Queen smiled weakly. Wouldn't dream of it. He stayed until she fell asleep. Nobody in the Mafia had ever seen their boss sit quietly beside anyone, much less a woman who talked back to him. When Miho entered to deliver files, he froze. Boss. Later, Jun-tae said quietly. She needs rest. Miho blinked. You care about the surrogate? Jun-tae's eyes snapped up, cold again. Don't mistake responsibility for emotion. But the longer he looked at her sleeping face, the more he realized he was lying to himself. Later that evening, Queen woke up alone. A white envelope lay on the table beside her bed. Inside, there was a note in his perfect handwriting. You'll move into my residence tomorrow. Safer there. Everything you need will be provided. JT. She groaned. Of course. Control freak. Still, a tiny part of her felt something she didn't want to name. Security? Protection? No, couldn't be that. He was just being controlling, right? The next morning, a black limousine waited outside her apartment. His men helped her pack her things. When she arrived at his mansion, she couldn't believe her eyes. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress made of glass, marble, and silence. Jun-tae stood at the entrance, hands in his pockets, watching her approach. Welcome, he said simply. This doesn't look like a home. She muttered. It looks like a museum. You'll get used to it, he replied. You'll be staying here for the next 9 months. She raised an eyebrow. You think I'm living under your roof? He stepped closer. You'll do as the contract says. I said I'd keep you safe. That means here. She stared at him, her heartbeat quickening. I'm not your prisoner. His gaze softened just slightly. No, you're not. But you're carrying my child. And in my world, that makes you my responsibility. For the first time, his voice didn't sound like an order. It sounded like a promise. Queen looked away. Fine. But don't expect me to follow your Mafia rules. I don't expect you to, he said, eyes tracing her face. You're too stubborn for that. Their eyes met, fire and ice once again. Something about that moment hung heavy between them. He didn't like being challenged, and she didn't like being controlled. Yet somehow neither could look away. As she walked past him into the mansion, he turned slightly, watching her. Queen, he called. She stopped. What now? He hesitated, then said, You did well today. She blinked, shocked. Compliments weren't his language. Wow, she said teasingly. I didn't know you were capable of being nice. Don't push your luck, he said with a smirk. She grinned, shaking her head as she disappeared down the hallway. For a man who built his life on power and control, Jun-tae didn't know what scared him more. The idea of being a father, or the fact that the woman carrying his child had already started to take up space in his heart. The weeks turned into months. Queen's belly grew, round and full, glowing under the soft lights of Jun-tae's mansion. The doctor said everything was perfect, but what no one could measure was how much she'd changed the air around that cold house. Before her, the place had been silent. Only footsteps, orders, and gun clicks. Now it smelled like warmth. Her laughter echoed in the kitchen sometimes. Her humming floated through the corridors, and even the guards started smiling more. But Jun-tae, he didn't know what to do with this new energy. He told himself every day, she's just the surrogate, just the mother of my child. Yet every time he walked past her, his heart betrayed him. One morning, he came downstairs earlier than usual. She was sitting on the couch, legs tucked up, wearing one of his oversized shirts. Her hair was in a messy bun, her skin glowing like honey, and she was sipping mango juice while scrolling on her phone. Jun-tae stopped walking. He stared longer than he should have. Why are you wearing my shirt? He asked coldly. Queen looked up, smirking. It's comfortable. You don't use it anyway. He tilted his head. That's not how this works. You're not. Your wife? She cut in sharply, raising a brow. Relax, Mafia boss. I'm not trying to steal your wardrobe. I just needed something loose to fit this belly. He clenched his jaw, but couldn't hide the slight smile that tugged at his lips. You're impossible. And you're controlling? She shot back, taking another slow sip of her juice, eyes locked on him. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick, charged. He turned away, muttering something under his breath as he walked to his office. But deep down, that morning image of her, glowing, confident, and untouchably beautiful, refused to leave his mind. That night, Queen couldn't sleep. Her back ached. Her emotions were all over the place. She missed being touched, being held, the warmth of another person. She tried to distract herself, but her body had other plans. She walked to the balcony, letting the cool wind brush against her skin. Below, she saw Juntae talking to one of his men. He was dressed in black, tattoos peeking from under his shirt sleeves, his expression cold as stone. But when he looked up and saw her, something in his eyes softened. Shouldn't you be sleeping? He asked, walking toward her. I couldn't, she said quietly. The baby's restless. He stood beside her, not too close, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. Dark, woody, dangerous. After a pause, she said, You know, you never smile. He looked at her. I don't have a reason to. She laughed softly. Maybe that's why your soul looks tired. He raised a brow. Are you giving me therapy now? Someone should, she teased. You act like the world owes you something. His lips curved slightly. And you act like it doesn't. They stood there, staring at the city lights, both stubborn, both carrying worlds inside them. Then her tone changed, quieter, vulnerable. Do you ever wonder what kind of father you'll be? That question hit him unexpectedly. He'd faced bullets and betrayal without blinking. But this one question made his chest tighten. He looked at her belly, then at her eyes. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to try. Something in his voice made her heart flutter. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't command. It was raw, real. Queen's pregnancy had entered the final stretch of its glow. Her belly was round and firm. Her skin shimmered with that golden tone only expectant mothers seem to have. And even her eyes had softened into something warmer, deeper. Every morning, she would walk down the long marble hallway of Juntae's mansion with slow, careful steps. The housekeepers would bow slightly, whispering how beautiful she looked. But inside her heart, beauty was not what she felt. She felt lonely, lonely in a mansion that had everything. Chandeliers, gold, bodyguards, imported flowers, but no warmth. Every night, she'd lie on the huge silk bed, turn on her side, and stare at the ceiling. Her body was alive with emotion, desire, and restlessness. She wanted to be held. She wanted someone to whisper that she was more than just a carrier of life, that she was still a woman. And every time she thought of that, her mind went to Juntae. He was still as arrogant as ever, still gave orders like a god, still looked at her with those unreadable eyes whenever they crossed paths. But something about him had changed, a small softness that appeared when he didn't realize she was watching. He started lingering around her a little longer after breakfast. He'd ask if she was eating properly. Sometimes, he'd even accompany her to doctor's appointments, sitting silently in the car, sunglasses hiding whatever was in his mind. Confused her. He had walls, tall, cold walls that even fire couldn't melt. And yet, he'd do small things that made her heart flutter. One day, she was trying to reach a jar from the top kitchen shelf, struggling, when a strong arm reached past her shoulder. Juntae. Their skin brushed. The moment froze. He said nothing, just handed her the jar and walked away. But Queen stood there for minutes, breath caught in her throat, her body trembling in ways she didn't want to admit. That night, she couldn't take it anymore. Her hormones were wild, her thoughts messy. She took a long shower, hoping the warm water would cool her restless body. But it didn't. It only made her crave more, crave something she couldn't name. Her mind screamed that it was wrong, that this was business, that he didn't see her that way, but her heart and body refused to listen. So she wrapped herself in her night robe and walked down the hall to his study. He was there, as always, sitting behind his desk, shirt half unbuttoned, a glass of whiskey in his hand, reading through documents like nothing could touch him. "Do you ever rest?" she asked softly. He looked up, a bit surprised. "Shouldn't you be sleeping?" She walked closer, stopping in front of the desk. "I couldn't. My mind won't stop." He studied her face, the faint glow of sweat on her skin, the way her robe clung to her curves. His throat tightened, but his voice stayed cold. "What do you want, Queen?" She hesitated. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe I just wanted company." He exhaled slowly, turning his chair to face her fully. "Company?" Her eyes met his. "You make it sound like a sin." He leaned back, smirking faintly. "With me, it usually is." Their eyes locked, neither willing to back down. The tension thickened until it became something you could almost touch. Then she did something unexpected. She walked around the desk and stood beside him, close enough to feel his breath. Her voice was trembling but bold. "You know, you could at least pretend to be human sometimes." He arched a brow. "What do you mean?" "You treat me like I'm just a womb," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Like I'm a contract on two legs. I'm still a woman, Juntae. I still feel things." Her words cut deeper than she realized. He clenched his jaw, pretending to ignore the fire that flared inside him. "And what exactly are you feeling right now?" he asked slowly. She looked straight into his eyes. "You really want to know?" He didn't answer, but the silence said enough. Queen took a step closer. Her scent, soft and floral, filled the air. His heartbeat grew unsteady. "I'm tired of pretending I'm fine," she said softly. "I'm tired of feeling invisible. I'm carrying your child, and you can't even look at me like a person." He stood up slowly, towering over her. "You're here because you agreed to it, Queen. You wanted the money." She swallowed, her anger rising. "And you think that makes me your property?" His eyes darkened. "Don't push me. Then stop acting like you're untouchable," she shot back. "You hide behind power because you're afraid to feel anything real." Her words hit like bullets. He froze. For a moment, he couldn't find a comeback. Then he laughed bitterly, stepping closer until their faces were inches apart. "You think you know me? You don't, Queen. You have no idea what I've done, what I am." She looked up at him, her eyes calm, defiant. "Then show me." That line broke him a little. For the first time, Juntae's confidence cracked. He looked at her, really looked, and all the things he'd buried deep down began to surface. But he forced himself to pull back. "You should go," he said roughly, turning away. "You're not thinking straight. Go to bed." Queen stood there for a long moment. Her heart pounded, her lips parted, her body aching from rejection. When he didn't turn around, she whispered, "You'll regret pushing me away one day." Then she walked out, slowly, gracefully, without looking back. That night, Juntae couldn't sleep. He tossed, turned, drank, and stared at the ceiling. Her voice replayed in his head. Every word, every look. "I'm still a woman. I still feel things." He hated how much it affected him. He hated that he almost touched her. He hated that part of him wanted to. He didn't want to fall for someone he'd paid. He didn't want to feel. Feelings were weakness, and weakness had no place in his world. Yet, every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, her soft lips, her glowing skin, the strength in her voice. He realized he was already losing control. Meanwhile, Queen cried quietly in her room that night. She wasn't ashamed, she was angry. Angry that she wanted someone who couldn't love. Angry that she let her heart flutter for a man who only saw contracts. But deep down, she knew something had shifted between them. Something she couldn't explain, but she could feel in every heartbeat. The next morning, she didn't join him for breakfast. She stayed in her room, writing down baby names in her journal, pretending not to care. And that was the first day Juntae noticed her silence. And missed it. The mansion had gone quiet again. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the heavy kind. The kind that sits between two people who said too much and not enough at the same time. It had been a week since that night in the study. The Night Queen had stood up to Jun-tae, her voice shaking, her eyes burning, her heart laid bare. Since then, she had decided to do the one thing he never expected. Ignore him. No more morning greetings. No more accidental conversations in the hall. No more trying to break through his stone wall. She had stopped looking for him altogether. Instead, she focused on herself, her routines, her meals, her health, and the baby growing inside her. The housemaids noticed. The guards whispered. Even the chef, who used to see her and the boss eat breakfast separately, said under his breath, "Something feels off." And he was right, because even the cold-hearted Jun-tae had started to notice the emptiness her silence left behind. Started small. He'd walk into the dining hall, expecting to see her sipping her favorite mango juice like always, but her chair was empty. He'd go to the garden, where she often sat reading under the shade, but now her blanket was folded neatly, untouched. He'd even peek into the living room at night, pretending to be checking the security cameras, when in truth, he was hoping to catch a glimpse of her watching TV in her robe. But Queen was nowhere to be found, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. On the 7th day of her silence, he finally cracked. He found her in the backyard one evening, sitting under the pink sky, quietly rubbing her belly. She was humming softly, a song he didn't recognize but somehow felt soothing to his soul. He stood there for a moment just watching. There was something about her presence, even when she wasn't speaking, that grounded him. She didn't fear him. She didn't need his money. She didn't crave his approval. She just existed, peacefully, beautifully. "What do you want me to call it?" she replied coolly. "You made it clear what this is. Contract. So I'm treating it like one." He walked closer, his voice lower. "You're being dramatic." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "And you're being heartless." He froze. Her words hit him like cold water. The worst part? She wasn't shouting. She wasn't emotional. She was calm, detached. That calmness hurt more than her anger ever could. Later that night, Jun-tae sat alone in his office, staring at the security monitors, one of which showed Queen sleeping peacefully. He didn't understand why it irritated him so much that she could rest so easily while he couldn't. Why does she get under my skin like this? He thought, running a hand through his hair. He picked up his glass of whiskey but didn't drink it. His mind replayed every argument, every glare, every stubborn comeback she'd ever given him. He thought about the way her voice had cracked that night when she said, "I'm still a woman." He wanted to believe he'd done the right thing by rejecting her, keeping their boundaries clear, but the truth was, he regretted it more with each passing day. Meanwhile, Queen's world had softened. She spent her mornings in the garden, talking to her unborn baby. "Your father's stubborn," she'd whisper with a little laugh. "He thinks feelings make him weak. Don't grow up like him. Okay?" Sometimes, she'd feel a little kick, and she'd smile through tears. At night, she'd cook small meals for herself, and the smell would drift through the mansion. Fried rice, stew, soup. Once, she even made too much and sent some to the kitchen for the staff. When Jun-tae heard, he silently joined them for dinner that night, just to taste it. He didn't say a word, but his chest felt tight when the chef said softly, "Miss Queen made it." The following morning, he found himself walking toward her room before realizing what he was doing. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again. Finally, her voice came from inside, soft and flat. "What do you want?" He hesitated. "We need to talk." "About what?" He exhaled sharply. "About this silence." There was a pause. Then the door creaked open slightly. Queen stood there in a long floral dress, her belly round, her expression unreadable. "I told you I'm fine. There's nothing to talk about." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he saw the exhaustion behind her eyes. "You're not fine," he said quietly. Her voice trembled, but she kept her composure. "Even if I'm not, it's not your business anymore. You made sure of that." He clenched his fists. "You think I don't care? Do you?" she challenged, stepping closer. "Because you don't act like it. You talk like you regret ever meeting me." Her words hit him right in the chest. He wanted to say something. Anything. But his pride, that same wall he'd built for years, wouldn't let him. So he turned around and said the worst thing he could have. "You're right. Maybe this was a mistake." Queen froze. The sting of those words ran deep. But she just nodded and closed the door softly in his face. That click echoed louder than any gunshot he'd ever heard. That night, Juntae didn't sleep again. He sat in the dark, staring at the contract papers, the ones that started it all. The ones that turned what could have been real into something cold and transactional. He picked them up and tore them in half. Then in half again. It didn't matter anymore. None of it did. Because the truth was finally sinking in. He didn't just want a child anymore. He wanted her. Her laughter. Her strength. Her warmth. But he'd already pushed her too far. Days passed. The emotional distance became heavier than any physical space could be. When they crossed paths in the hallway, she'd look away. When he entered the room, she'd leave. And every time she did, something in his chest ached a little more. His men noticed the change too. His orders were sharper, his temper shorter, and his focus gone. He was fighting a war inside himself, and he was losing. Until one afternoon, when he returned home early and saw her struggling to lift a heavy box in the garden. Without thinking, he rushed over and took it from her hands. She startled, meeting his eyes. "Why are you doing that?" she asked quietly. He looked at her belly, then at her. "Because I should have done it all along." For the first time in weeks, their eyes softened at the same time. He placed the box down carefully and said, "You don't have to carry everything alone, Queen. Not even this." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Then stop treating me like I'm replaceable." And with that, she walked away, slow, graceful, leaving him standing there with the weight of his own guilt. That night, Juntae stood by her door again. He didn't knock this time. He just stood there quietly, listening to her soft breathing inside, and whispered to the closed door, "I'm sorry." He didn't know if she heard him, but somehow saying it made the mansion feel a little less cold. And somewhere deep inside, Queen smiled faintly in her sleep, as if her heart had heard it anyway.
Hello, besties. He thought it was just business, but Queen was about to teach him what real power feels like. The story is only getting started. Love, betrayal, and obsession are about to collide. Stay tuned for episode 2. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.